Okay, now that you have some idea about GAS, that is a script, it is residing in the server. We need client to trigger the execute. So assume you already have a script, right? How would you then make it available in the internet? So whatever you are doing or the script that you are developing, they are not available when they are being developed. So how do you make it available? It must be published, right? So the key steps involved to make your GAS web app available online, it must be published. So there's an action, or there is an action that you must do to tell Google that now you are releasing the web app to the public domain, so that whoever comes along, any web client, can access the web app. So to publish, there are two steps. You can test deployment. So this test deployment is temporarily, or you can do an actual deployment. To me, both of them serve the same function to make it available within the internet, but subtly they have a slight difference, right? So this part, I'll leave it to you to test out for yourself, because part of the lab activity, you will first run test deployment, and then you have actual deployment. Okay, next. Remember, we talk about making available within the internet. When you make something available in the internet, there must be a unique ID, a unique tag, so that you can find it in the internet. And in this case, there will be a unique URL, right? Unique URL generated when you deploy. Okay, and why do we need this unique URL? So that the web client will know where to find this web app. Okay, so again, the address, the concept of address, the concept of unique, I believe all of you would have captured this long time ago. Next, with regards to deployment, all right, you must take note that when you do a deployment or test deployment, there is an entity created that allows the web access. Now, when you make any new changes or modification to your GAS, it will not affect the deployment that you made previously. So let me try to describe. When you deploy, they create an entity, which is like creating a copy of that web app that you have developed. So when you have new changes in this point that I'm talking about, the new changes will not happen in the previous deployment. Okay, therefore, be careful. I think many occasions, or at least from the past experience, I've seen your senior, all right, trying out things and not seeing it happen, and a bit puzzled, asking me, "Sir, I make a change already. I do this, I do that, but the response is still the same." This is because every time you make a change, you must deploy. All right, you must deploy, and that is the part, like in your embedded system. Every time you update your sketch, if you don't upload to your MKR, then your MKR is still holding on to the last version of the firmware that you have. Okay, and I think I have let the cat out. If you do actual deployment, then you need to make sure that you deploy again, okay, so that the changes will be reflected. Unless you use test deployment, then the test deployment will get will have the responses, or the reflecting the changes made within your Google Apps script. So this part, test and actual deployment, all right, have this subtle difference in terms of behavior. Nonetheless, I think nothing beats having your first-hand experience with running through the activities. So tomorrow for MEC site, Thursday for MDME, I would encourage you to try it out, to see for yourself and understand some of these behavior within GAS deployment. Okay, next. When we develop web app, something very important that you need to add as a function to allow it to become a web app is this function called do-get bracket E. Right, the do-get function, I think get is something that you have seen previously. Remember when we do our manual test or manual update to ThinkSpeak, I asked you to copy the API key update URL, and part of it has a get function. So in HTTP, get request is a call function, right, to get communicated with the server. So it is important that you create your web app with this particular do get function, which is to convert the GAS into a web app, right? So this is how the server will know that the script that you are creating is a web app. Now, what is so special about this E, right? What is so special about this E? In all functions, the parameters within the round bracket refers to input parameters. So when we develop a web app, the item E within this bracket refers to input parameters that is sent over by the web client. Recall that when we send data to ThinkSpeak, we have a question mark. All right, then we put in field 1 equals something, field 2 equals something. Those are input parameters. And those input parameters will be captured by the server and stored within this variable. And this variable E will contain data sending over by the web client. All right. So whatever you send over, you can actually retrieve at the server end by using the dot notation e.parameter.name. So the dot parameter dot name refers to extraction of the data that you send over. At this juncture, I suspect many of you may be a bit confused, don't understand what I'm trying to say, but stay with me. All right, I'm going to go through this with you, and then coupled with the lab activities, you will definitely be able to appreciate how input parameter that's sent over by the client can now pick up by your server, in this case Google server, and then using this data to do whatever that's necessary. So try to put this aside if this is confusing. Just imagine if in the case of ThinkSpeak, when you send through the browser, right, typing the URL and then clicking enter to send to ThinkSpeak server, how would the ThinkSpeak server know your data? And this is what we are doing here, something similar with Google. We are trying to empower Google to have something similar like ThinkSpeak to be able to filter out the data that you send over and then subsequently store in your Google Sheets. Okay, so we are going step by step, sharing with you that the function is important. The do get function is very important. Following that, how can you capture data from your web client? Okay, so the question mark that I talked about previously, this is to add in your input parameter, and input parameter comes in this form, a variable name equal the variable content. So in this case, this name refers to this name, and then the Google refers to the data, right? The data that is going to be stored. What I've presented here is to show you that if there's a web client coming in to trigger this web app after deployment, and what do you get to see? You can actually see these input parameters that has been sent from the web client. And this will tally with what I have sent over using a web browser. All right, so this is the input parameter that we have obtained. So there's a question asking, what's the difference between parameter versus parameters? So parameter is just looking at one particular data set. When we type in parameters, we look at our data as an array. Okay, so this is the subtle difference in JavaScript. So do be careful the use of parameter versus parameters. And in some cases, it can be helpful. In some cases, if you are not sure how they are being used, at times you get your data mixed up. All right, so try not to get yourself confused. Try the different options, parameter and parameters, to see which best suits your application. Okay, to summarize, how do we create a web app? First of all, you start with a standalone script, right? Create a new GAS, and then you must include the do-get, like what I showed you earlier. Do-get is just one of the many methods to create web app. There are do posts and so on, which I don't want to dwell too deeply into. So back to what I've just said, pay attention to just do-get will do for now. For those who are inspired to become Google developer, then I will recommend that you read beyond do-get. Okay, next, after you have created your do-get functions within the GAS, write in your codes. Once you're done with it, then you must activate, you must deploy, And this is the two options, either to test or to actually have an actual deployment. Only after your deployment that you have a URL. The URL, as I mentioned, it is unique URL so that whoever or whatever web client that comes along making use of this particular unique URL in the internet, it will then trigger your web app. Okay, so if you don't deploy, then there's no way for you to test because there's no URL. Okay, finally, remember when we send data to ThinkSpeak reply to us. So if your web app is also wanting to reply to your client, then you can use some of these functions. You can use the HTML output to reply to your function, or simply do a text output to send us text information back to your client. Okay, so this covers how you can generally create a web app within GAS. Now, in order for you to integrate your GAS with your Google Sheets, this is the spreadsheet API service that I'm going to go through with you. In short, this is equivalent to installing additional Arduino libraries in Arduino IDE. So in order for your Arduino Sketch to make use of other functionalities that's out there, you install Arduino libraries. And back to the slides here, if you are trying to get your GAS web app to interact with Google Sheets, there are built-in library functions, which they call APIs. You can then make use of these API functions to easily integrate functionality with Google Sheets. I leave it to you to read up some of this, right? This will help you find out what are the various functions available within Sheets API. Just to draw your attention in terms of the hierarchy that Google Sheets has, it often, all right, start at the highest level, which is the workbook. Workbook is your file or your sheet file. Within this workbook, when you open up your Google Sheet, then you realize that there's a lot of tabs at the bottom, just like Excel spreadsheet. And each of these tabs refers to sheets, right? Each worksheets. And within one worksheet, you see a lot of cells, and these are cells. Just like MQTT, we have different levels. Of course, the highest of all would be the workbook, which is the Google Sheet file. Within the workbook, we have various pages. These are the sheets. And within each page, you have the cells. And talking about notation or formatting or syntax, Google Sheets uses a A1 notation, right? What do you, okay, some of you may be wondering, what is A1 notation? Right, A1 notation is a format that is used to describe how we can access the cells within worksheets. I think I have some examples, all right, probably in some of the slides. So before we look at all those, I have a simple example code for you to refer to. This is the combination of a web app plus Google Sheets. Okay, so what is going on over here? In this web app, all right, within this web app, first of all, we know it's a web app because we have to do get function, right? So this is the first one. Secondly, we have a text output. So this text output is to reply to the client who sent over by replying with a text called hi plus a name. We don't know the name yet unless the client sent over. All right, so this e-parameter.name will be referring to these input parameters. All right, now I know that you are how many years old. So again, e.parameter.age is an input parameter. When the client sends over a data set, if they provide or if it provides name and age, then we can group this data together to form this statement. Okay, so this is what is going on. Now, other than replying to the client, how can we then store the data? So here, these are the various steps involved to empower your web app. Firstly, for your web app to know where is your Google Sheets. So you need to provide the URL. So we store the Google Sheets URL in line 5. After that, we will use the Sheet API function to open our worksheet. All right, so line 6, we'll open a worksheet and store a handler or pointer, which is SS. Here is the spreadsheet, right? So that we know SS is now pointing to our worksheet. And if we want to open the tabs or the worksheets, sorry, let me say again. I think I made a mistake. So when we have the URL, we use the SS to store the workbook. All right, remember the workbook is the file. So we use SS to point to the workbook. Now that we have the workbook, which is SS, we can then open up the workbook to find the respective worksheets. And which worksheets we are going to open? We are going to open the worksheet called data, right? Called data. Now, at this juncture, line 7, that we are having this WS as a pointer pointing to the worksheet called data, we can then store data into, store values into this worksheet called data. How do we store? We know that WS is the worksheet. We use the API functions called append. Append means add new rows. So we append row onto the worksheet. What are the data that we are going to store? We are going to store the name, we are going to store the age, and then return all these things. So this is a simple 10-line kind of a code to capture data from your web client, analyze the input parameters, open your workbook, open your worksheets, store these two input parameters within your worksheets. And in this case, this marks the end of your web app. The automation is here, all right? The automation extract the input parameters and store into your worksheet, which is called data. So be careful to be mindful about the names and structure. And this is one of the activity for this week. Go and run through so that you can see how a web client through your web app can put data into your worksheets. And if you can do it manually, just like what I've always asked you to do when we try out new things, okay? Manually test first, make sure that as an operator, you yourself test it out, things are working fine. The next step will be to make use of your microcontroller. Subsequently, what you can do is to send or set up your MKR Wi-Fi 1010 to send data to the same web app, and the data that could be a sensor information. What is the sensor information name? What is the sensor value? Then they can be stored within your worksheets. And this is how you can design and build up your own data storage. All right. Now, this is what I've shared with you before with regards to the use of the APIs. So in Google, they have built in their own functions to help you open up your workbook. So we are using open by URL. So we use the URL functions to open your workbook and then get particular access to the worksheets. And finally, the use of append to store data inside your respective worksheets.